So, the topic that's on my mind today is really it's the expression be strong and of a good courage. You will find this throughout the Bible. And so I will not be able to hit every point, but I will try and give a few for good examples. But where I actually want to start is an example of doing it wrong. And that goes all the way back to when the children of Israel had been brought out of Egypt. The Lord worked mighty wonders to bring them out. Many, many miracles. The land of Egypt, they were basically a superpower in comparison to Israel. They had all the military, all the wealth, all the riches. They had everything in their favor, and yet this enslaved country was brought out, and Egypt was just completely decimated. Their crops and cattle and people were sick and killed off, and just absolutely amazing. And then as they're crossing the Red Sea, whatever was left in the military that was chasing after them was drowned. So it was just a severe treatment of the Lord against Egypt. And yet, when it came time to go into the land of Canaan, that generation was scared. They were full of fear. They had seen all these miracles. They wound up sending 12 spies in, and they came back, and 10 of the spies brought back a report that scared people. It was, the land's great. This is Numbers 13. We've got it on your screen there. It's Numbers 13, 27 through 31. The land is wonderful. It flows with milk and honey. It's a good description of the abundance. It's good pasture. It's plentiful. The fruit is there. They grabbed a cluster of grapes, and it was so big it took 2 men to haul it back. And so they had wandered through the land for 40 days, and they came back and said, the land's great, but nevertheless, that's but for our language, but the people be strong that dwell in the land. The cities are walled and very great. Moreover, we saw the children of Anak there, and those were giants, big folks. Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and Amorites dwell in the mountains. The Canaanites dwell by the sea and the coast of Jordan. So these are all the people that were there already. And then one guy speaks up. His name's Caleb. He's one of the 12 spies. He stilled the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." But the men that were with him, that went up with him, said, "We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." So Caleb and also Joshua, who's going to eventually lead the people in, those are the 2 spies that were given a good report, but the other men said, "We can't do it." And they were afraid. They looked at the human factors. The walls are too great. The people are too tall. There's too many of them. We can't do it. Instead of looking at what the Lord had already done and who was on their side. And so this whole generation is going to be lost because of this fear. And so in the next chapter, in 14, the congregation, this is the size of the people, there's about 600,000 men, plus their wives, plus all their children. They lift up their voices and they're crying. And this is that, we can't do it. The people wept that night. And not only they wept, they start complaining. They're murmuring against Moses and against Aaron. Aaron's Moses' brother. He's the one the Lord is going to appoint as the high priest over the people. And the whole congregation said unto them, "Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in the wilderness." If we were saying that today, you imagine the sneer in somebody's voice saying, "Well, it would have been better if we just died in Egypt, or it'd be better if we just died in the wilderness, rather than come here to this land where we're going to get killed by the sword, and our wives and children are going to be prey. They're going to be captives. You brought us all this way just to kill us, and our wives and children are going to be captives. Wouldn't it be better for us just to go back to Egypt, that place where they had been in bondage for hundreds of years, and they'd been crying to the Lord for deliverance, and he sent deliverance, and now they're at this spot, and they're afraid, and so they said, well, let's just turn back. Let's make us a captain and go back." Moses and Aaron fall on their faces before the assembly of the congregation, And then Joshua and Caleb, the two spies who went that gave the good report, they rent their clothes, which is just a common way in the Old Testament where they are manifesting their distress and anxiety, and they're just so upset by what's going on. You're just rending your clothes. And they spake unto the company, saying, The land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he'll bring us into this land and give it us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. That expression, bread for us. You ever heard somebody say, I just eat them for breakfast? Same concept. There's no defense against us in comparison. They're just like, the same way you'd eat a meal. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. And you think after that rousing speech, maybe they've been reminded about what happened when they brought out of Egypt, but instead they wanted to stone Joshua and Caleb. Said, kill them. That crazy talk. We want to go back to Egypt. Stone them. And then the glory of the Lord winds up appearing in the tabernacle of the congregation. Just for the sake of time, I'll summarize. The Lord says, first I'm going to kill them all. Moses, step away. I'm going to kill them all. We'll start over. And then he says, no, please don't. Again, very, very paraphrasing to read it. And then he says, what? I'm going to give them what they asked for. You said it'd be better to die in the wilderness. Done. All of you are going to die in the wilderness. You're not going to be able to go in. And then your children who you thought would be prey, it's going to be their job to go in and fight. And then the 10 spies are going to be killed instantly. And the rest are going to have to die as they wander through the wilderness for 38 years. Now, the people are upset by this verdict, and they try to take it back. Say, no, we'll go in now. But it was already too late. And so they tried to go in anyway, and they went and they invaded, and they got their tails absolutely whooped. But the point of all that is that you had this very blessed generation who had seen signs and wonders, seen the Lord working, and yet when it came time, they failed. And their test, their trial, they failed because they looked at all the obstacles rather than looking at the Lord. They were consumed by fear. All right. So fast forward 38 years, and Moses in the book of Deuteronomy is going to be speaking to the next generation. All those kids who had also seen the miracles have now grown up. Anyone who was under the age of 20 years has grown up. Anyone who is 20 years and up, they're all dead. And so Moses is going to give in the book of Deuteronomy a recap of the law. So make sure everybody understands and reminds them what's gone on over the time of coming out of Egypt. And this is one of the things. Let's make sure we're looking at the right spot. Yeah, there it is. Deuteronomy 11. It says, Your eyes have seen all the great acts of the Lord which he did. So as children, they had seen that. It says, Therefore shall ye keep all the commandments which I command you this day, that ye may be strong, and go in and possess the land whither ye go to possess it. All right, so he's giving them instructions of one, you have to keep the commandments. And if you're keeping the commandments, that you'll be strong and go in and possess the land, whether you go to possess it. Right? And that word strong is what I'm really interested in this morning. And that word, the Hebrew word, translates to literally to fasten, to seize. Figuratively, it's to be of good courage. But what are you fastening on? You're fastening yourself on to the Lord. You're holding on to him. You're being strong in him. As in most things in Scripture, this is going to be repeated. Moses is actually going to repeat himself to the people again, right before he's going to die and before the people are going to cross over Jordan. He's going to give them one more set of instructions, and this is at the end of Deuteronomy. It says, The Lord shall give them up before your face, that you may do according to all the commandments I've commanded you. This is talking about your enemies falling. So here's the command. Be strong and of good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. And then there's an explanation of why. For the Lord thy God, he it is that goeth with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Right? So you've got be strong, be fastened, be seized upon the Lord, of good courage. And that good courage means to be alert, steadfast, attentive. You're not walking with your head down in a fog or distracted. It's be focused on the Lord, be attentive, be strong and of good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. And that word afraid, fear, we understand what fear is. It's not exactly this. But this word afraid, the literal translates to more like awe or dread. You can imagine in your mind, if you've ever been harassed mentally by something that you're just so bothered by, you're in dread of it, whether it's taking a test as a kid or getting up and give a presentation or whatever it is. Don't fear it, nor stand in dread of them. And the reason is for the Lord thy God, not just a God or the God, thy God. Possessive. Yours, you're his. He it is that goeth with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee. This word fail means to slacken or to abate, draw back, wax feeble. All these are good. But basically it means he's not going to let you slip out of his hand even a little bit. All right? It's not going to be his grip loosens and you fall through the cracks. And the other is forsake, because he's not going to completely abandon you or relinquish you. So he's not going to fail you in part, and he's not going to fail you altogether. He's the Lord. He's going with you. That's the reason that you can be strong and of good courage. All right, so that's Moses, this leader of the people who's now old. He was 120 by this point. This is a current leader talking to the next generation, giving them good counsel. Keep the commandments. Be strong and of good courage. Fear not or be afraid of them. Your enemies here. For the Lord thy God, he goes with thee. He won't fail thee or forsake thee. And then he's going to turn around to the next leader, and he's going to give him the exact same message. Moses turns to Joshua in the sight of all the people. And so publicly he's saying, be strong and of good courage, that thou may go with this people into the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, he it is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Fear not, nor be dismayed. All right, so you get that one little nugget here with dismayed, that's new. That dismayed means to be broken down, to be discouraged, to be brought to confusion, to be broken down by violence or fear. So don't fear, don't be discouraged, don't be afraid, don't be dismayed. And the reason for all that's the same is this the Lord. He's going with thee. You're keeping his commands, you're following in his will, and doing as he desires. He's going with you. All right. So fast forward, Moses goes up to the mountain. He's able to look over to the land. He had been banned from going in because he disobeyed earlier when God told him to speak to a rock to bring water out. And he said, must I fetch water for you, ye rebels? And he whacked the rock with a stick. He made it about himself. And so in his pride, the Lord said, you can't go in. You can see the land, but you cannot go in. And Moses asked him several times to reconsider. No. So he goes up to the mountain, he looks over, he sees across Jordan and into the land, and then he dies. After the death of Moses, you get to the book of Joshua. The Lord is actually going to speak to Joshua directly and encourage him. And so, you had a leader speaking to the next generation. You had a leader speaking to the next leader. And now you've got the word of God encouraging a young leader. You're in words being spoken directly by the Lord, but it also applies to us as far as reading the word, being encouraged by the word. And here's what it was. Starting in verse 5, there shall not be any man to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee or forsake thee. That's God directly saying that. Moses just said he won't. Now the Lord saying, I won't fail thee or forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage. Same message, right? For unto the people shalt thou divide an inheritance, which I swear to the fathers to give them. Only, repetition here, be thou strong and of good courage. And if you're being strong and of good courage, that thou mayest observe to do all the law. Being strong and of good courage enables you to keep the commandments. Keeping the commandments helps you be strong and of good courage. It's all linked. They're all together. You can't have one without the other. Which Moses, my servant, commanded thee, turn not from it to the right hand or the left, that thou mayest prosper wherever thou goest. Right? Prosper. I had a conversation with a young man in my church the other day about what does it mean to be a success? What does it mean to better yourself? What does it mean to improve yourself? And there's a very worldly definition, and that could be just, well, I made more money, or I got a bigger house, or I got a bigger car, or whatever. That could be a worldly definition of success. And And by that definition, guess what, guys? I'm a failure. I walked away from an attorney-paying gig to come down to a little church in South Georgia for like an 80% pay cut. Okay, by the world's definition, I'm not a success. I'm a failure. But by the Lord's definition, am I prospering? Well, there's two words here. There's prosper and prosperous. We got two different definitions in the Hebrew that's behind it. The first one, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. That word prosper means to be circumspect, intelligent, to be alert, that you are growing in your mental understanding of serving the Lord. If you're being strong and courageous, and serving the law, that thou mayest prosper. Right? And then it goes on saying, this book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do all according to that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous. Okay, what's that mean? Does that mean make money? No. That literally means to push forward. Push forward, and then thou shalt have good success. All right, and the idea here, the image and pushing forward that comes to mind is somebody pushing a plow through ground, the old timey plow. You got the mule pushing through ground that's never been broken before. Are you making progress? Are you following down path towards the Lord in all your life? That's the progress that you want. That's the success that you want, pushing forward towards Him. Verse 9, have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. And that broken down. For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. So 3 different times in the same interaction, the Lord has told him, be strong and of good courage. I'm not going to fail you. I'm going with you. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. All right? Do as I say. All right? Then the next example is going to be later in that same chapter. Joshua's going to give some commands to the people. The people are going to turn around and say, all that you command us to do, okay, whither thou sendest us, we'll do it. We'll go. According as we listen to Moses in all things, we'll listen to you too. Only, the Lord thy God be with thee as he was in Moses. Whosoever he be that rebels against thy commandment and will not hearken unto thy words and all that commanded, him will put to death. Only be strong and of good courage. So here, encouragement's going to the leader from the people. So normally we think about encouragement going, downhill, the leader to their followers, encourage them. Here, the followers are giving encouragement to the leader. It's going to go to wives, to husbands, to children, to parents, to, employees, to bosses, whatever, to encourage them to do the right thing, encourage them to be strong in the Lord, to be of good courage, to be alert and attentive to his desires and expectations. So I appreciated that, and I see that, particularly within my church, as people are trying to encourage me as a young pastor to continue to stand fast for the Lord and His Word. So later in the book of Joshua, they go in, they're fighting, they fight a group of folks to the south, they fight a group of folks to the north, people who are banding together, these multiple kings to fight. And so in one of these events, when these groups of multiple kings have banded together to fight against Israel, they whoop them. They whoop them, all of them. But Joshua is going to use this as a teachable moment. They bring these captured kings to him, and they bring the leaders of Israel and say, come on, put your feet upon the necks of these kings. And they came near and put their feet upon their necks. And that's a pretty good visual image that you have defeated them, that you're victorious, right? And Joshua said unto them, this is to the leaders, says, fear not, nor be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage, for thus shall the Lord do to all your enemies against whom you fight. And afterwards Joshua smote them and slew them and hung them upon the tree, and they were hanging upon the trees till evening. And so he took an example in real time of, guys, here's an example of the Lord delivering it. Use this in remembrance as you're going forward and fighting the future enemies that you're worried about. And I think worth noting here that Joshua and the nation of Israel had a literal mandate to go in and pass judgment upon the people who lived in Canaan for the wickedness they were engaging in, and by God's decree that they were ordered to dispatch them, to kill them all, men, women, and children. There's no survivors to be ordered. When we talk about our enemies today, we have no such command. We are not to take up arms to try and conquer the world and make things right and to right all wrongs and end evil. That's not our command. In Ephesians 6:12, you're given the armor of God, spiritual armor, because you have a spiritual warfare. We fight not against flesh and blood, men, but against principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places. That you have spiritual battles that you are called to stand fast in. That's who you fight today. Those are the enemies that the Lord is going to overcome, is those who are assaulting you there. Now, will you have enemies in this world who don't like you and may, God forbid, may even want to kill you? Yeah, very much. It's a possibility. Romans 12:17-21 gives you pretty good indication that it's not your job to deal with them, to get vengeance, to right every wrong. We're to overcome evil with good, because the Lord's promised that vengeance is mine. And that's He's speaking there. So vengeance is His. We don't have to do that for Him. So I'm just going to give that little caveat there. All right. So going forward, look at the next time this expression comes up, be strong, of good courage. It actually comes up in 1 Samuel 4:9, and it's not the Israelites speaking, it's their enemies, the Philistines. Philistines, that's where Goliath of Gath comes from. He was a Philistine. They're primary enemies for many, many years. At this point, Israel had been subject to Philistines and trying to fight and rebel against them. And they lost a battle. Things weren't going well. And so they thought they would bring the ark down to the battle, and that would be, like a talisman or good luck. And so that would be, good for them to win. And so when the ark comes into the Israelites' camp, there's a big shout. They're very encouraged. And the Philistines hear the shout, and they're scared. But then they say, be strong. Quit yourselves like men. And that quit doesn't mean to stop being a man. It means to exist as a man. Be manly, O ye Philistines, that ye be not servants unto the Hebrews, as they have been unto you. Quit yourselves like men and fight. And so they're encouraging themselves to be strong, to not give in to the fear that was overcoming them or had just a moment ago. And you may say, isn't it a pretty bad example to pull out what the enemies of Israel were doing to encourage themselves? Maybe so, except for it appears again in the New Testament, that expression of quit you like men. It's used by the Apostle Paul in his letter to the First Corinthian church, the first letter to the Corinthian church. And the Corinthian church had all sorts of issues, and they had just a mess. But one of the last things he put in there was to watch, stand fast in the faith, quit you like men, be strong. This whole idea of standing fast, don't allowing the truth of God's words to change, watch, be alert. It's the same concept of be of good courage. Quit you like men, be manly. Don't fold and cave or run when things are hard. Be strong, be fastened to the Lord. Okay. Later, fast forward again. So we've gone from the Philistine times. That was in the time of the judges. You're going to get to the time of the kings. Your first king, Saul, he's dead. Then David reigns, and then David gets old, and his son Solomon's going to reign after him. David had asked to build a house for God. He wanted to build a temple. God said, no, you were a man who shed a lot of blood, had many wars. You're not going to be allowed to build my house, but your son will. Your son will be allowed to. He's going to be a man of rest. I'll give him peace on all sides. His name will mean Solomon. His name will be Solomon, which means peace. I'll give him peace and quietness. He'll build the house. He'll be my son. I'll be his father. I'll establish his throne in the kingdom forever. So David now, as he's old and telling Solomon all this, he said, the Lord be with thee and prosper thee. Build the house of the Lord thy God as he said of thee. Only the Lord give thee wisdom and understanding, and give thee charge concerning Israel, or give thee authority over Israel, that thou mayest keep the law of the Lord thy God. Wisdom and understanding to keep the law. Then thou shalt prosper. Push forward down that path. If thou takest heed to fulfill the statutes and judgments which the Lord charged Moses concerning Israel. Be strong and of good courage. Dread not, nor be dismayed. You can think about Solomon, the task, just this monumental task that was before him. And it was huge because he spent years building the temple. And, I think he had somewhere around the order of between 90 and 100,000 maybe even 150,000 men working on it. I don't have it off the top of my head, but many people working on it for years. And this is a big undertaking. And so I don't know if you've ever got involved in a long-term project, whether it's building a house or remodeling a house or anything that's kind of construction related. It always takes longer than it is, but there's 100,000 decisions to make, and it can be overwhelming. And so he's just, even in that simple terms, you need to be encouraged. But here in much bigger terms, and you're trying to do this to please the Lord. So be strong, have good courage, dread not, nor be dismayed. Don't be in awe or dread of it. Don't be dismayed. It says, now in my trouble, I have prepared for the house of the Lord. And he gave the list of the things that David had been accumulating over his lifetime to give Solomon a head start on the raw materials. Okay. Now, this is a good example of a father, a godly father, encouraging his godly son in the Lord. That's great. One leader encouraging the next leader. Not everyone has that blessing. And so even if you don't have a mentor who's pouring into you, you can still be encouraged. You can still be encouraged in the Lord. And that's what David had to do when he was in his time of flight. First King Saul was very jealous of David. He knew that he was going to be an adversary for the kingdom. And so he spent many years chasing him around the woods, trying to kill him. And so at one point, while David was hiding among the Philistines, I believe, he had been living in a particular town. He and all his men, he had a band who followed him, and they had gone out to a fight, and they were told, sent back. And when they got back, the town had been raided. All their wives and children had all been captured and kidnapped and been taken away. And so everyone's upset. I mean, the people are really, really upset, and they blame David. He said David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. Now, David had 2 wives that had been kidnapped too. But what did David do? David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. So even if you don't have somebody pouring into you and reminding you of God's truth and his word, you can still be an encouragement by going and encouraging yourself in the Lord. That's what David had to do. Now, going back to his time with Solomon, so he's telling him this once, and then it's going to appear again a second time in Chronicles. He's going to repeat himself. And this is going to be, shortly before David passes away. He's going to tell him again, Solomon, his son, be strong, of good courage, fast in the Lord, be alert and focused, and do it. Fear not, nor be dismayed, for the Lord God, even my God, will be with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee until thou hast finished all the work for the service of the house of the Lord. And so there is not just this emotional feeling of be strong and good courage. There's some action. It's got to be happening. Do it. Don't let fear hold you frozen. Right? Continue to push forward in the service of the Lord, in the service of the house of the Lord. Right? All right. I'm going to wrap up with a chapter from Isaiah. All right, it's Isaiah 35. And there are beautiful word pictures in here, and this expression of be strong appears yet again. But ultimately, this whole thing is pointing to Christ. All right? So I want you to imagine in your head these word pictures as I read through them. All right, so the wilderness and the solitary place and the desert. This is our description of kind of our initial starting point. Wilderness, there's no people, there's no resources. Desert, it's lonely, it's bleak, it's sad place. You wouldn't want to live there. You want to even visit there. Right? Those places, those bad places with no resources and really no hope, they'll be glad. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as a rose. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice, even with singing, with joy and singing. Right? You ever seen those documentaries where sometimes in the desert it goes from just being just sand and nothingness to that very rare times all these desert flowers are just blooming as far as you can see, just blooms and blooms. It's so beautiful and full of life and wonderful. That's kind of our scene here, only it's not as fleeting as in those desert blossoms, which tend to only last just a very short time. So the desert whereas dry and arid before is now blossoming abundantly. And it's rejoicing with joy and singing. And then you're going to get descriptions of 3 very rich and luscious lands, and saying that all those glory from those lands are going to be given to this, what used to be desert and solitary wilderness. All right. The glory of Lebanon, they've got the best trees. The cedars of Lebanon, that's what the temple was built with. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it. So the best forests, the glory of that is given. The excellency of Carmel. Mount Carmel is where Elijah wound up getting into the fight with the prophets of Baal, and fire is going to be brought down, and all the prophets are destroyed. But there's also vineyards and things that are on and around Carmel, and so it's a wonderful, rich place. Apparently, if you look up the word Carmel and just do a word search and follow through. Same thing with Sharon. Sharon is like this wonderful pasture land for crops, not crops, but flocks, that they're able to grow and be safe. And so the best of all these areas, the mountains and the pastures and the woods, the glory of all of them are going to be given to this solitary desert land. That unlooked for spot is going to have this glory, and they'll see something. They're going to see the glory of the Lord, the excellency of our God. All right. And I'm looking at this in 2 different approaches. One is looking at it how it was the world when Jesus came. He was born into Israel, and a poor home. His prophet that came before him was John the Baptist, who was preaching in the wilderness. It had 400 years of silence where there had been no prophets. The religious service of the day was cold and static and just self-righteous. It was the lip service to God. And then out of that, the poor are going to be preached to, and they're going to be able to see the glory of the Lord. They're going to be able to see Jesus with their own eyes and the excellency of God. All right, so that's one track that we're going to have as we read through this. The other track is in you individually. When you are born into this world as a human, you are dead in trespasses and sins. You have no spiritual life. This is your inheritance from Adam. Everyone born after him is born dead in trespasses and sins. You have no spiritual life. And so in that sense, you are like this dry and dusty desert where you're all alone. There's nothing there. It's sad. And yet all of a sudden, there's blossoming, there's rejoicing, there's singing, there's joy. All the best glories of the world are put within you, and you can see the glory of the Lord. That is you being born again. That is the Holy Spirit coming and dwelling within you, and suddenly you have spiritual life. You can see the things of the Lord. You can see Jesus, not with your natural eye, but you can see and love him, all right? The excellency of our God. And so that's the other track, is talking about Jesus coming into the world, and then also talking about your not physical, but your spiritual life. What was dead and dry and worthless has now got life, and it's abundant, and there's joy, and there's singing, and there's rejoicing, and you're seeing, and you're singing praises to the Lord. Right? Strengthen ye the weak hands, confirm the feeble knees. Say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong and fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. Even God will recompense. He will come and save you. All right. So this strengthening, to strengthen means just what you think, to fasten upon, to be strong. The weak hands, those that are slack, those that aren't gripping, give them strength. Confirm the feeble needs. Confirm means to literally give courage. And the feeblest, the tottering or the wavering, those who are just about to fall. Say to them that are of a fearful heart. Fearful literally translates to liquid or melted. Their hearts melted within them. What do you say to them? You say, be strong. Fear not. Why? Behold, look, your God will come. He'll come with vengeance. Even the God with a recompense, he will come and save you. The vengeance is for your enemies. He's promised that he'll repay. The vengeance is mine. He's going to come. He's going to deal with that. That's referring to the last judgment. He'll come with recompense, and that's when he pays back everything that he hasn't already paid for. He will come and save you. So every single one of his children came in human form, died on the cross, and saved you. Right? Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened. And so in that sense, we're looking at Jesus's ministry. At one point, when John the Baptist was under arrest, he sent disciples to Jesus saying, "Are you the one?" He'd already had confirmation that he was the one because he had been told who the Spirit of God in the form of a dove rests upon. That's going to be the one, and he saw that and he gave witness to that. But later, after he'd been in jail for a while, he sends his disciples and says, "Are you the one? Are you really the one?" And Jesus doesn't answer him immediately. He starts doing a bunch of miracles. He heals the blind. He heals the deaf. He heals the lame. And then he turns and gives them their answer. He says, the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, and the poor have the word preached unto them. Right? So that was their answer. And this is part of the fulfillment. The eyes of the blind shall be opened. The ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. The lame man shall leap as a hart. A hart's like a deer, leaping. And the tongue of the dumb shall sing. The dumb not being unintelligent, but the mute, you don't have the ability to speak, be able to sing. For in the wilderness shall waters break out and streams in the desert. And so this gives you that imagery of the living waters that Jesus promised the woman at the well, that whoever comes and drinks of the living water shall never thirst again, and those should be given freely. And so, in one sense, that's literally, these are the miracles that Jesus did and testifying of who he was and the power he had, but also in the sense of looking at you and I, before we were born again, were blind. Our ears were deaf. We had no ability to move. We were lame. Our tongues were mute. This is all description of being dead in trespasses and sins. And yet, when he came, you could see. You could see for the first time. You could hear the word for the first time. You can sit in church all your life, but if the Lord hasn't done that work in your heart, ain't none of it going to mean anything to you. You can have an intellectual thought, and you can read tons of scholarly articles about what people think the Bible read, but you can see pretty quickly whether or not they've got spiritual eyes, because the way they approach it is very different from one who knows it applies to them. So whereas we were lame, now we can jump up and be in the service of the Lord. We have tongues to sing his praise. Wilderness shall break forth, the streams in the desert, parched ground shall become a pool. You got three different illustrations to describe what was dry and arid is now abundant with water, and the thirsty lands and the thirsty lands of spring. So four different illustrations. The habitation of dragons, where each lay, shall be grass with reeds and rushes, and a highway shall be there. Right? This highway is what I want to end on. And highway shall be there, a way. It shall be called the Way of Holiness. The unclean shall not pass over, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men. Though fools shall not err therein, no lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go up thereon. It shall not be found there. But the redeemed shall walk there, and the ransom of the Lord shall return, and come to Zion, with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. All right, what is this highway? In one sense, it's Jesus himself. He said that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father except by me. By his body, he tore down the partition between you and God, the enmity that was there because of your sin. He removed it, and now you have the right to approach unto God. The way that the Old Testament, they didn't. There was that veil that separated them between the holy and the most holies, and only the high priest could go in once a year with blood. That was a constant reminder that there was a separation from you and God. That's been taken down. And so he is the way, and it's also your path here below. As you're following your marching to Zion, I don't know if you ever sang that hymn, it's following the path, the way of holiness, the path that Jesus laid out before. That's what we're following along. So we're talking about making progress. It's making progress down that path, the way of holiness, the keeping the word of the Lord, trying to serve him. It says the unclean shall not pass over it. And that Passover just means to cross over it. The chicken crossed the road. It's not the chicken walking down the road. And the unclean, the perverse, they don't have anything to do with the way that the Lord prepared. They don't care. They're not even going to accidentally cross over it. That's the fools with not erring. They're not going to be staggering or drunkenly walking there. It's only for the wayfaring men. That means the traveling, the pilgrims, the sojourners, also later called the redeemed. The redeemed. And what does that mean? Well, the redeemed literally means to be bought back, right? You were sold unto sin, and you were purchased back. The purchase price was Jesus, his blood, his sacrifice. He stood in your stead, and you have been bought back. And so it's like you have been a captive in a foreign land, and now you're passing along this highway going home. You've been made free. You've got a long way to go yet, but you know the path. It's the way of holiness. No one's going to fear, no one's going to molest you on that to tear you off of that. When Jesus said that it is finished, what he meant was it is finished, that there is nothing else that anyone could do to add to his work of salvation. There's nothing that anyone could take away from it. The lion can't get you, and the lion's often used to refer to Satan himself, that he would like to, devour. He's like at the door waiting to pounce. He can't. He cannot defeat what Christ has already done. No ravenous beast shall go up now. Now, you can be harassed. You can be discouraged. You can look down, and you can have a hard time as a follower of God. But the end's not going to change. You were chosen by God before the foundation of the world. Your name was written in his book. He died for you. You've now been born again, and you have the privilege to see that. You're going to be there with him at the end. And so the message to you and to me is, as we're going down, that we have been captives, we're made free. We're walking home, making progress, getting down that road. We're walking there. We're going back to Zion. We can approach it with songs and everlasting joy upon our heads. And sometimes there's imagery used to describe the saints being given crowns. That's probably a good expression for what the crown is. You've been blessed with a crown of everlasting joy, the knowledge of what Christ has done for you and that it can never be taken away. And it says when they get there, when they get to Zion, they shall obtain, they shall receive joy and gladness. Those are permanent, right? And sorrow and sighing, sorrow being all affliction, sighing being the groanings and moanings, they're going to flee away. They'll vanish away. That won't be there. There'll be no tears in heaven. That you will be with your Lord who bought and paid for you. You'll see him with your natural eye. That's what we're working towards. That's what we have to be encouraged about, of knowing the truth of what God is and how powerful he is and how much love he had for us and how he's not going to leave us and forsake us. And there's nothing that can tear us from his way where he's put us. Be strong and of good courage. Fear not, nor be dismayed.